It's the revenge of the shift on Capitol Hill. We'll talk about the latest deep state shenanigans to take down the president through this impeachment farce, plus whatever else we feel like, because it's Freestyle Friday.
This isn't about for Democrats. This is for the American people. This is about patriotism. It's not about politics, Democrats, Republicans. It's not about anything political. It's about patriotism. It's about honoring our oath of office.
Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It's amazing. Hearing what's going on Capitol Hill, seeing what's going on Capitol Hill, and then Nancy Pelosi is staring out at the country via various cable news channels and just lying to you or just speaking to you like we're all a bunch of total morons. It's not political. No, what's going on Capitol Hill right now with a whole bunch of politicians of one party desperately trying to concoct a narrative to destroy a president of another party, changing what the charge may be, changing what the allegations are, hiding certain evidence, leaking other evidence. It's not political, though. I don't understand what they really expect people with any sense of judgment, any ability to think for themselves to come away from this believing. If you don't think that this sham that's going on Capitol Hill right now is political, you are too stupid to have opinions about politics. It's just a fact. If you really believe that this is being done because suddenly and against their wishes and against what they want for the country, the Democrats just stumbled upon a pretext to start impeachment hearings against the president after the flop of the Mueller investigation. Yeah, if you believe that, I don't know what to say. You're probably also dumb enough to think that Kavanaugh was guilty, in which case you shouldn't have opinions really about anything. Probably have trouble remembering where you live and how to get up and do anything of any worth in the morning. So I just got to tell you, it's going to be tough. It's going to be rough sailing out there for a while because the Democrats they've made their decision. They've decided that this is going to happen and there's no way to back out of it. There's no way and they don't want to back out of it, right? But we are going to have to deal with this day in and day out. And the problem from a media perspective and from the perspective of trying to do a worthwhile show for all of you, and this is going to be true, I think, of a whole lot of hosts, I'm already a little bit not just frustrated. The whole thing, it's so transparent. It's so pathetic. It's such an unfunny joke. But the focus of the entire media apparatus of this country and the political apparatus is going to be on this. So we have no choice but to roll up our sleeves, jump into it, get into the mudslinging contest with the Democrats and see who comes out even dirtier, I suppose. It's not political. It's about patriotism. And Nancy Pelosi will say anything. She's an utterly shameless. In a sense, she's the perfect politician because she'll just do whatever she has to do. She is a demagogue, a person who speaks to, says things that they know to be untrue to a room full of people they know to be idiots. Pretty good for Democrats. That's usually the way they tend to approach these things. So what's happened already in the hearings from earlier today? What do we have to get into? Okay. You have a bureaucrat from the State Department, Yovanovich, who is giving a very lengthy recitation of her amazing career in the Foreign Service. My friends, Foreign Service career involves a lot of memo writing, going to luncheons, going to dinners, especially at the ambassadorial level, sitting around watching PowerPoints, getting shuttled by diplomatic security from place to place. It's very cushy, especially when you're abroad in the State Department. This is not, and people say, oh, but what about the hardship posts? Okay, I mean, yeah, some of the hardship posts, they also get paid a lot of extra money for that, by the way. And hardship posts are a way to advance your career. And I don't think I really need to hear from a State Department diplomat about how tough it was to be posted in Somalia when we've had how many members of the armed services in the last 18 years or so serving in war zones where they are expected to engage and fight the enemy and are risking their lives every day, as opposed to a diplomat who's expected to show up and have meetings, have conversations with people. I'm not saying it's not a necessary thing. I'm just saying let's not act like these foreign service bureaucrats are the equivalent of the Avengers out there, right? It's not that tough. This is not something that's that scary. And the backstory telling, I mean, you have people all week now who will go back and tell us their patriotic history stretching to the Battle of Bunker Hill if they can. And yet we can't know who the whistleblower is or what his background is or even what he's been up to for the last couple of years. What kind of campaign against the president might he have been running behind the scenes? We can't know any of that to evaluate this. This is making a mockery of process. And that's one of the big takeaways that I have for you. They've been leaning on process all along here to try to, and abusing process to try to destroy the president. You know, keep in mind, if people approach many different aspects of the government with no good faith at all, whether we're talking about prosecutors, investigators at the FBI level, down to local police level, if there's no good faith, if they just want to get you, they can always construct a pretext. They can always say, oh, you know, we have a confidential source, can out the confidential source that says that you did this crime, so now we're investigating you. There are a lot of ways to abuse process and abuse the system. And they've been doing this all along. But now what you see is that even the hijacking of the very upper echelon of the fourth branch of government, which we should really start referring to. I mean, we shouldn't elevate it because it's not constitutionally supposed to be, but there is an element from within the executive branch that is permanent, that does not care who the president may be at any point in time, and believes that they have a duty to override the bad decision-making of the elected officials that we have empowered to make those decisions. That is clear. That has come across from all of this. You'll also notice in all of this sort of weepy-eyed, oh my gosh, I was fired, or people said mean things about me when I was an ambassador, they talk about the need to protect Ukraine. I mean, the country, we're all being dragged into this discussion of Ukraine, which is, you know, not the most important country in the world. I'm not saying it's irrelevant, but we're speaking about this thing so much, speaking about this place as though it's, you know, Great Britain has been invaded and we haven't done enough to defend it. At the end of the day, the Obama administration was feckless and ineffective in the face of Russian aggression, specifically in Ukraine. None of these diplomats seem to have a harsh word about that. Very upset about Rudy Giuliani stomping around in their area of diplomatic operations, but not a lot of words of criticism for the Obama administration that wouldn't send the Javelin missiles, for an Obama administration that didn't do very much at all of any worth in the face of incredibly aggressive Russian moves. Trump put on more sanctions. Trump gave the Javelin missiles. Oh, and then today they released an additional transcript, a transcript of the first phone call between President Trump and President Zelensky, in which the president very clearly offers to host Zelensky at the White House and bring him over. So you know how last week you were hearing about how Trump was using a White House meeting as additional leverage and quid pro quo and bribery and extortion. And, they're just yelling about all these things all the time and repeating them endlessly. And the media ecosystem, I think, thinks that the only way that they can regain their former glory is they have to finish off this president. They know that otherwise, not only are they corrupt and biased and full of liars and self-righteous, sanctimonious clowns, and the upper echelon of the elite media is rife with those. In fact, it is the exception to the rule that if you are an anchor at one of the Democrat networks out there, it's the exception to the rule that you're not somebody who is intellectually unimpressive and personally dishonest and even sometimes somewhat odious. I'm not saying so. Like I said, there are exceptions, but they're the exception to the rule. The only way they can reclaim their former, Edward R. Murrow glory is if they decide that or rather, if they manage to finish off this president. The media, they don't want the voter to do it. They don't want a Democratic election to be the deciding factor here. They would prefer that President Trump's administration is ended at their hands. That's what they're trying to do. Or at least to be the ones that very clearly damaged him so much that when he goes to the election, they can claim that they were the ones that really were the turning point in favor of the Democrats. It was this whole effort to breathe seriousness, gravitas, meaning into proceedings that are simply absurd. I can't imagine any normal person thinking, one, that Adam Schiff is not the slimiest liar in Congress, because he is. But I also can't imagine anyone thinking that this is a worthwhile effort against the president. I would really prefer if they had at least tried to relitigate the Mueller probe. Why did they have to walk away from that? Because they realized there were some vulnerabilities there that exposed themselves at the very end. That was the original plan, I would know. They were going to impeach Trump based on the Mueller probe. That was why Weissman wrote it the way he did. That was the whole point. That's the 10 counts of obstruction, and he was laying it out. It was an impeachment roadmap. But then Mueller came out and testified, and people said, well, hold on a second. What was really going on here? How did this guy not even know what was happening? So Weissman was really in charge? Weissman's now an MSNBC analyst. Only an idiot thinks that Weissman isn't a left-wing partisan. There are a lot of idiots out there, unfortunately. But it's quite obvious. This is all politics. This is all meant to be the deep state striking back and the elite lashing out at and not just Trump, but it's really the whole Trump movement. Everything that Trump has exposed about them, everything that Trump has shown the general public, that a lot of these people that we've been trained to think of as better decision makers, wiser, more ethical, and therefore should be more powerful, should have more influence over your life than would be even constitutionally prescribed. They're deeply unimpressive, selfish hacks, and they like their positioning in society, and they're willing to be very, very dishonest and to debase the very ideals they claim to represent in order to maintain that position. It's true of the media, it's true of elite politics, it's true of a lot of people these days. Who are they really? Who are these so-called experts that are running things from Washington, D.C.? We're seeing some of them on display. Yovanovich and Kent and Taylor. And okay, I mean, look, do I think that they're bad people? No, I don't think they're bad people. Do I think that they're a bunch of Democrats who hate Trump? Yeah, I think that's pretty obvious. So let's just call it what it is. Oh, but the latest today is that they have now already said that President Trump may have added to his impeachment woes during the hearing in real time. Well, we'll have to get to it.
I was there when we wrote the whistleblower laws. The whistleblower is there to speak truth to power and have protection for doing that. And any retribution or harm coming to a whistleblower undermines our ability to hear truth about power. So I will defend the rights of the whistleblower vehemently.
But the rights of the whistleblower don't extend to a blanket ban on identification. Sorry. Yeah, that's right. There can't be retaliation. The president can't just say, yeah, okay, we know the whistleblower is, he's fired. That's what the whistleblower, and I agree with that. Unless there's malfeasance exposed about the whistleblower, which, by the way, I think is probably going to happen if we ever actually can get to the bottom of it. I think it's very likely. Although he's crafty. He's a crafty fellow. Going to Schiff's committee, working with a lawyer who knows the national security apparatus from the inside. I mean, this guy, he did his homework beforehand. That much I think is clear. But he also did his homework for the Democrats. But I'm hearing these bizarre arguments about how we need to protect the. No one's saying don't protect the whistleblower. They're saying don't. The claim that they're making is don't out the whistleblower. The whistleblower is not, because of this complaint, considered a matter of government national security. Whistleblower is not classified. The whistleblower, by the way, has already been named all across the internet. And we've talked about, with attribution, who the whistleblower is supposed to be. The whistleblower, according to the New York Times, well, to the Washington Examiner, following on a New York Times piece, as well as others, I think the AP may have named him too, is this guy Eric Sharamella. Okay. So what does protecting the whistleblower mean? It means we don't get to know if that's really the whistleblower? That's what protecting the person means? Anonymity, huh? Get to run this all the way up the chain, try to take down a president in a political hearing, and this person deserves anonymity. That's not in the statute. That's not, Now, what I think, and I'm seeing some rumblings about this today, I mean, Senate Republican majority Senate committee should just be like, all right, we're going to subpoena the whistleblower. Put him under oath. Yeah. That's what they should do. I mean, oh my gosh, the Democrats would completely lose their minds, but why not? They have oversight too. Republicans, wake up. This is a fight for the Trump presidency, for control of the United States government that is underway right now. And the other side will do anything, fight as dirty as they can, lie, cheat, and steal. You know, it's time to put on a helmet and get into the fray here a little bit. It's time to throw down, not just leave it to the president to do for himself. Where's the Senate on this one? The American public, despite the media pretense that this is not the case, which is appalling, by the way, and it's so obvious and unfair, the American public has a right to know who this guy is. The same way that we are supposed to sit around and listen to how wonderful and amazing all these State Department employees are that are trying to take down the president, we have a right to know who the person is that has brought this complaint against the president of the United States. Why not? How else can we evaluate the motivations behind all of this? They tell us that it's patriotism and exposing of wrongdoing. Well, let's see for ourselves. Let's know. Remember, the whistleblower only told us about a transcript. It was the narrative around the transcript that the whistleblower was offering up as the reason for us to hear about this. Okay, well, what were those reasons coming from? What was the basis for all of that? We have a right to know. And if the press was serious, they would do their job, and we would already know. But they're all in on this against Trump.
Perhaps you have not heard me when I have said this is something we do with a heavy heart. This is very prayerful, because impeaching is a divisive thing in our country. It's hard. And the place that our country is now, it's not a time where you go to 70% when President Nixon walked out of the White House. It wasn't there before he left. Even 2 weeks before he left, it wasn't there until the other shoe fell and he walked out.
That's right. Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to do this. Yeah. Trump's making her do this. I mean, Democrats are shameless, utterly shameless. At least just be honest about what's going on here. Tell us that you think you have an opening to create out of nothing a narrative to take down a president, because you know that the candidates you're putting forward and also the ideology of the Democratic Party has gone so far left that you have real concerns about whether they could even win a national election in 2020. And what would that mean? I mean, they start to think about things like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I know that there's this cult around RBG right now on the left. This cult around her workouts. I've seen little RBG like workout dolls and things. It's bizarre. Right? She's a tiny old lady, but they've created this mythology around her, and I think it's because they recognize that there's going to have to be a mobilization of the shrill and insane left like nothing we have ever seen before. If, in fact, you have a Republican Supreme Court appointee or a Republican president appointing a Supreme Court justice, and in this case, it would be perhaps President Trump if, let's say, Ruth Bader Ginsburg had to retire. You saw what they were willing to do to Kavanaugh. Still the ugliest thing. I mean, I have flashbacks to sitting there and watching it. I mean, not like PTSD flashbacks, but I just very clearly remember that whole process and thinking to myself, at least the one part of comfort for me was, at least I'm not one of these disgusting, soulless, morally decrepit Democrats. At least I recognize that someone like Justice Kavanaugh is a good man who deserved none of what he got. But people become very desperate. They become very desperate when they think that government power is necessary for the creation. The government power in their hands is necessary for the creation of a fair and just society, and that if the other side has government power, everything will be ruined. One of the problems the Democrats have to deal with now. Look around the country. Does everything seem ruined to you? Has the stock market collapsed? Is unemployment 12%? These are all things that we were told. Have we gone to war with a foreign country because of Trump's destruction of foreign policy? Whatever happened to the nuclear war he was going to start with North Korea, or his recklessness in moving the embassy to Jerusalem, or his destructive move by pulling us out of the Paris Climate Accord, or removing us from the horrifically negotiated Iran nuclear deal? These were all supposed to lead to terrible things. Where are the terrible things, I ask you? Nancy Pelosi and her Democrat comrades in arms, they have all been lying to you for 3 years. What they have said would happen has not happened. What they have said was just about to come true has not come true. Shouldn't we evaluate them based upon all of the lies, based upon all the promises that they have put forward that came to nothing, or that showed us that they were working against our interests, that they were making things up, that they were willing to dissemble in order to get what they want? What really is the pitch that they make against this president? By the way, as you have Ambassador Yovanovich on Capitol Hill trying to get her place in the left-wing Hall of Fame of anti-Trumpers. Let's remember that you have this enormous State Department bureaucracy with a lot of people working in it who have been doing so in many cases for decades. And there are certain approaches, certain ways of thinking that has been inculcated into the department, as well as a lot of the training you do when you're there and various employees. And they like to think that only people of a certain background and certain temperament and approach to foreign policy could be successful, because that's what all of them have been doing, the way that they've approached their jobs for a very long time. Trump comes in and he's not supposed to be an expert on, say, China trade. Who, on the fundamental question of whether or not we should take action against Chinese predatory, unfair trade practices that are enriching the Chinese at our expense, who was more correct, the President of the United States, or who knows how many diplomats over the last 3 decades in dealing with China? The experts told us that if Trump did this, there would be massive economic consequences for us, that this was a terrible idea. Turns out the economy is still doing very well. And China has been suffering economically much more than we have, which was the point all along. You need leverage to get somebody across the table from you in a negotiation to do what you want. This is what Obama didn't understand, or rather, this was Obama's fundamental flaw in the approach that his administration took to the Iran deal. You don't show up and say, hey, I want to buy a car, and I'm not leaving here until I do. Well, that makes that a lot easier. The dealer can say, all right, well, here's the price. Take it or leave it. That was pretty much what we did with Iran. No painful concessions, no dismantling of any program, lots and lots of cash released to them. Also that Obama could say, look at me, I have a foreign policy legacy now. That's not just a disaster and defeat and despair everywhere where Obama actually took an active role in foreign policy, which was the case up until the Iran nuclear deal. Look at a country. It was worse off after 8 years of Obama. Look at one place that was a foreign policy hotspot. It was in bad shape. And remember that these diplomats who keep telling you, these ones who are coming out to speak against Trump, who said that they've served under multiple presidents, yeah, we know this is what the deep state, the fourth branch of government, they stay in government. Doesn't matter which president is there. And they have their own views that they reflect into policy. I mean, this was considered a big sin when I was in the intelligence community. You're not supposed to be policy prescriptive. That was the way they used to say it. It's not for you to determine what good U.S. foreign policy is. You're just there to provide information, provide the necessary context for the decision makers, people who are in elected office or people who are the direct appointees of the president enacting his will, enacting his policy proposals. That's the way this is supposed to go. But there are a lot of people who figure they know more, they've been there longer, they understand better, and they forget that we have elections so that the people can empower decision makers, not so that the people can empower decision makers who then have to rely on a bureaucratic class that decides when and where they're going to do what they have been ordered to do. They talk about Trump's Ukraine policy like it is some kind of disaster. Trump's Ukraine policy has been better than his predecessors. Ukraine is in better shape now than it was when Obama was the head of the foreign policy apparatus of the United States government. It's just a fact. And for all of this, the wailing and the cry, I can't believe they fired Yovanovich. Oh, my gosh. I mean, I have a lot of questions about this. One is, why did they think that she was bad-mouthing the president? Did that really came out of nowhere? I'm not saying it's impossible, but it seems strange, doesn't it? It seems strange. There was a lot of Obama administration, a lot of Democrat high-level interest in Ukraine before Trump came into office. So what kind of relationships were built there? And who had formed an ideological allegiance perhaps against this president before he even showed up? And people say, but Trump appointed this person, for example. Yeah, because you got to pick for your team from the roster that's there. Okay, well, you inherit the State Department if you're the president. Okay, I got the State Department. You go to war with the army you have, which Rumsfeld said and was totally taken out of context because that was after he talked about upgrading Humvees and getting better armor and doing this and doing that. And he's like, yeah, and ultimately you got to do what you got to do when you got to do it. You go to war with the army you have. You go to diplomacy with the State Department you have. So that shouldn't be used against the president in the sense that just because he's like, okay, well, I guess we'll confirm this person. He doesn't have the time or the bandwidth, and nor should he, to handpick every single person that he knows or has vetted beyond any doubt to be in these different posts. You got to go with the people that are the government officials, the government servants who are working from within the bureaucracy. But I want to remind everybody that we're being told that the Yovanovich firing is this terrible thing and that her dismissal from her post, next flight out and after 30 years. And how much sadness was there in the media when a bunch of anti-Trumpers entrapped General Flynn after 30-plus years of military service, decorated veteran. And they weren't just ending his job as National Security Advisor for 30 years. They were going to throw him in prison. Did you see any people in the media doing these long, so patriotic. General Flynn was a great man serving his country, and then this happened, and we're just so sorry about it. No, they're like, yeah, get him. He's one of Trump's people. Get him. That was the approach across the anti-Trump media, without exception. Yeah, another one bites the dust. Another person serving Trump. Done. That was the approach. So I'm sorry if I'm not going to buy this. It's so sad, Yovanovich. She was the greatest diplomat in history. Another point to make here. We're supposed to be upset because an ambassador was changed out, replaced in her post. The American people, remember, and I mean that, they're doing this whole spectacle on Capitol Hill. The Democrats are presenting this as, look what's happened, and you were so great. And then Trump came along, and this evil man Giuliani, who, by the way, cleaned up New York City, and because of what he did in this city, thousands of people are alive that would not have been because of the immense decrease in violent crime in this city, turned the biggest city in America into a true global capital. And also, if you remember him after 9/11, really held the city together at a time when we were rattled to our foundation. And Now they're acting like Rudy Giuliani is some evil henchman. Oh, Giuliani was stomping around doing all these terrible things. I'm going to take you back a little bit. Do you guys remember the Obama administration came in and they wanted to do things differently than Bush? Bush was the bad, warmongering president, didn't understand foreign policy, just not super smart like Obama. That was what we were always being told. Bush was so dumb, Obama was so smart. Okay. Came in and he was going to change things in Afghanistan, dramatically escalated the war in Afghanistan, brought it up to about 100,000, I think it was over 100,000 at one point, troops, but also said, we're going to do this for this period of time, then we're going to draw down, which was bizarre to everybody that I knew. Even a lot of Democrats in the national security apparatus were like, that's just, you don't do that. That's a completely artificial timeline driven by domestic politics. But there was something that was even more telling than that. Remember, we're supposed to be upset, teary-eyed, because Trump fired Yovanovich, and she was very sad. You guys remember General McChrystal, one of the more revered generals in the military, and especially within the special operations community? General McChrystal was the 4-star commander in Afghanistan. And right at the time when the Obama administration was making its plans to prosecute and dramatically escalate that war, McChrystal was unceremoniously fired from that job. Fired. Remember why? You remember why General McChrystal was fired? Because a Rolling Stone reporter thought that it was worthwhile to put in the piece that some of McChrystal's aides didn't think very highly of Obama's comfort with and respect for the military. So essentially, they bruised Obama's ego a little bit in Rolling Stone, and so the 4-star general had to go. McChrystal didn't do anything. He didn't say anything. It was the people that were around him, some of his aides. But they talked a little trash about Obama. Got to go. Got to fire the 4-star. Do you remember anybody saying, wow, there are more important things than Obama's ego, which I don't think Democrats really believe. I think they believe Obama's ego was the most important thing in the world at the time. But prosecuting a war, we're losing soldiers in the battlefield. People are dying. You're going to replace the 4-star general and throw the chain of command out of whack and change strategy and take who was one of the most gifted commanders, from what I am told, of his generation, and replace him just because he said something, because he hurt Obama's feelings a little bit? And it wasn't even him. It was his aide. The guy didn't do anything. Was everybody talking about, oh, our republic is under assault? And that was a real issue. Ukraine. You place Ukrainian ambassador. You put me as ambassador to Ukraine tomorrow, I'll be fine. This is ridiculous. I'd actually be a great ambassador to Ukraine, side note.
By the way, what President Trump has done on the record in terms of acting to advantage a foreign power to help him in his own election, and the obstruction of information about that, the cover-up, makes what Nixon did look almost small. But again, an inquiry is an inquiry, and people come in and you hear what they have to say. Next week, some of the Republican suggestions of witnesses will come in.
Democrats better be careful here. They've gone to this length. They've gone to this point in the story, and they better make sure that we don't end up getting some of the witnesses that we want to answer some of the questions we want answers to here. I do think that this whole thing could blow up in their faces. I can't predict the future, but there's a real risk of it. They have taken a risk in this whole process by going forward on such flimsy pretext. Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying that what Trump has done on the record, so what they all agree on, what Trump has done on the record, makes what Nixon did look almost small. Worse than Nixon. And yet, no Trump supporters are saying, oh, wow, I can't support him anymore. There's been no change in public opinion the way there was about Nixon. And this is when I tell you that they're looking for their Watergate moment, that's not, they're open about that. This is what Democrats live for in the media, in Democratic politics. Hillary Clinton was involved in this stuff back in the day. I mean, you look at the effort to get Richard Nixon was a paramount political moment for the Democratic Party and for the left. And they think they're going to do it again here with Trump. They really do. And for the media, it's the only way to make all of the debasement that they've engaged in of themselves worthwhile is if they can take down this president.